Um, letting it grow, Will. I ain't stopping.
Well, I can't do that. I can't let it get too long. Cut it off every now and then.
Well, as long
Well,
as I'll keep the sides trimmed, but I'll let this grow.
yeah, I got to do something to cover this ugly mug.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Most of you have rejoined, so that's good. We can check your box, your attendance box, right? Um, but hope everybody had a good chance, good lunch, good chance to get something to eat, or as we do here at Novant, catch up on emails and phone calls because they never seem to stop, no matter where you're at. So. All right, we're going to get back into emergency management. We've talked about all the great acronyms. There's not a devoid of acronyms when it comes to emergency management. We've talked about that HVA that's required by the TJC and the DNV, and then we've talked about the EOP that's required by CMS and all that. Now we're going to get into the 96 hours. So part of the regulatory requirements is to build out a 96-hour plan. We'll have just a example scenario coming up next. Will can cover that, the example scenario of, but basically, our accreditation and regulatory, primarily our regulatory, and that would be our CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that ensure we're in compliance. We must, within our emergency management plan, demonstrate that we have a 96-hour operational plan. Some folks often confuse this with we must have 96 hours of stuff no matter what. And that's not true. We just have to have a plan so that if you don't have 96 hours of stuff that you can't get resupplied, maybe fuel, water, food, you at least have a plan in place that's a documented plan to demonstrate what you would do to continue operations or show how you would cease operations and shed load. So a 96-hour document does that. This is another one of those required plans to have, just like your HVA and EOP. So there's a regulatory. So let's look at the example to just put it into context. Will, you want to take that one?
Yes, sir, absolutely. So the 96 hours is not a requirement for a stockpile. It's like Kip said, it's just a plan. Um, some scenarios may require decreasing service and treatments to extend on-site resources, but a 96 hours plan just focus on on-site resources, distribution, and planning for external assistance. Um, so basically, for an example, a 96-hour plan would be our water on site, our metal canned water that we have in pallets. If it goes beyond that, we have our MOUs or our actual contracts with Davis Water. So,
Yep. And
um,
then, well, I was saying the fuel example that's there, and this is one where if it wasn't for you guys, again, I'm never going to be able to keep up. So when I ask for our HVA or assistance with our 96-hour document, and I believe we're going to take a look at one of those here in a little while. We we don't know these calculations and formulas. You know, my math teacher always told me, Mr. Clark, you're going to use this one day. Just wait. And she was right. So when we talk about the fuel capacity, you have so many generators on your site. If it's a community hospital, that may be one or two generators. I think we have what, 5 to 7 generators. There used to be 7, there may be 5 now. I can't even keep up with the number there on a Presbyterian, and with the new central energy plant at Foresight, God only knows, the generator capabilities of that. But if your gen's running and burning 250 gallons an hour, and you're setting on a 20,000 gallon on-site tank, calculations, there you are, it's 80 hours. So we're 16 hours short of 96. So we're going to have a resupply within 4 days if we're on, generator power and it's running at that max load. And you all know as well as I do, generators burn fuel based on how much they're being stressed. So if you're not having a heavy load like at the night or during certain times, might go longer, might not, but that's critical to help evaluate that. And that's where the subject matter experts like yourself come into play when you're doing that. Can someone give me, and we're going to talk a little bit about, but what's something else that you might think about that you need to know a burn rate on or something along those lines? Or who can tell me, like, I would be curious to know for the guys that work there at the coastal region, if we have that new Hanover team, how many gens do you have on that very expansive campus there? And what's your fuel burn rate an hour if you know that?
I'm from I'm from the coastal market, but I don't work at the main campus, and I don't think anybody on here could answer that question. But the orthopedic hospital, let me back up a second because we just had a walkthrough with DHHS here recently to reopen Pender Memorial Hospital,
Yep.
and the head engineer for DHHS, let me pull up his quote exactly here. Verify there is an alarm to comply with NFPA 110 5.2 5.5.2 that the generator will alarm at 96 hours.
That's good. I'll be honest with you, the minutia of that rule I'm not familiar with because when I look at the CMS standards, it's having that plan of operations to sustain. Let me even go back a little further and give you where the impetus of that is. Why do we plan on 96 hours versus 48, 72, 120? What's the 96 hour? What do we expect is going to happen within 96 hours? Federal relief. So it goes back to the Katrina years where the federal government and FEMA and I'm just going to there's going to be some comments here, there's going to be opinions, so I might put the disclaimer up, is you really can't think about how someone's going to help you because there's no guarantees they are. We have things in place, but FEMA they tell us that you need to prepare for 4 days. You need to prepare for 96 hours before you should expect the government to come in and help you and resupply you. Now, in all my years, I never remember the federal government bringing in diesel fuel for a hospital or federal government bringing in things, but there have been things that have happened. If it gets to that, maybe it will. Even in the case of COVID, you didn't see that really happen. Hospitals have to take care of themselves, but regulatory agencies like what you just talked about, Matt, have got to have, they're going to read the provisions, they're going to read the requirements, and then they're going to interpret it and give you that information. Now, I've never heard of your generator having to have an alarm that goes off at 96 hours. I've never heard of that. It's the first time I've ever heard that. I'd love to go back. I might try to go back and find that where it says that. But what it does say is you got to have a 96-hour plan so that if you run out of fuel, you either have refueling agreement or you're going to shed this much load or you're going to operate this way or you're going to close the hospital and evacuate. That could be your plan. It's not a great plan. I wouldn't like that plan, but it is a plan. So when it comes to this, so I can't answer that specifically because I don't know that exact requirement. And I guess if you want to put an alarm on there, like a timer that says, hey, it's been 96 hours, beep, beep, beep. Guess what? You probably need to do something. Well, we're going to be doing something way before 96 hours if we're running on gens, right? So we're going to be invoking every agreement we got. And honestly, I don't know of any hospital we have that doesn't have well over 4 days of fuel on hand that I'm aware of. Anyway, the ones that I help manage directly, they have well over 4 days of supplies on hand, but I don't want to quote on that. I know people like Steve and others, what your capabilities are at your facilities, but I don't know, Steve, you got how much fuel does Matthews have on hand if they were running on gens? How many in days that your calculations tell you? And he may be
Yeah, I
preoccupied.
think he stepped away.
Okay, okay. I didn't check the chat. What about Seth? What about you?
Yeah, we burn about 50 per hour. Our load is very, very small out there at Manhell. and our tanks are 12,000, 6,000. So we got fuel for days.
Yeah, yeah. So again, that's an interesting one though, Matt. I'm gonna have to follow up on that one just because that sparked my interest there that I've never heard that, but I've certainly been asked for your plan. And that's something that we want to get you prepared for. And that's what's going to lead us into this next thing. So Lindsay, if you'll show what we've got there from a TJC, the next slide. If just go ahead and hit the next one, we've talked that one. But from the 96-hour plan, again, it must outline that facility's capability and then how it maintains the essential functions. And if it does not stockpile 96 hours, but you got to have a plan in managing the resources during that event. So remember, never want to confuse folks with this one. You don't have to have 96 hours of stuff, but you got to have a plan to maintain operations for that 96 hours or what you're going to do if you can't. So again, shedding load, shedding patients, shedding services. And that was something that I know Presbyterian did. We mentioned that earlier, is there's certain things like we stopped elective surgeries. We stopped other things just to help build the capacity. That's a good question, though.
Yeah, I would say, you can also turn down the fans on some of those air handling units. That would reduce the load.
Yep. And weather cooperating, it's not in the middle of summer. It's not in the middle of winter when, you might be burning more power, more energy. If it's a mild temperate day, but on a cold day or a very hot day, that's not going to be possible. So your burn rate is going to be dependent. Let's jump over to the next one on how we achieve this. How do we achieve those operations? Some are through MOUs. If you've never heard of an MOU, it's a memorandum of understanding. These are things that we have in place, and these are the ones that I want to caution y'all. Caution you because a memorandum of understanding is just that. It's a specific document that outlines an agreement between partners, and it might be a vendor. So we'll answer the question, oh, well, we don't worry about food. We have a memorandum of understanding, an agreement with our food supplier. They're going to keep us stocked with food. Well, sounds good. So does every other hospital in the state of North Carolina. So does every other hospital in the Southeast, and so does every other hospital in the nation. So it's fine if it's a local emergency. Remember, incident or disasters, large scale, emergencies, just you. May just be your one facility. And that memorandum's perfect. U.S. Foods, Cisco, other suppliers, they're not having to fill the nation's food basket. They just have to fill yours. But if it's a broad disaster, large scale, COVID or other regional disaster, their MOU could get stressed and then they could say, we can't fulfill it. So this is why it's so important to have efficient stockpiles at your own facility where you can care for yourself for that 96-hour period, understanding it would be that much longer before you would get something. Does anyone have an MOU that you currently know about or would like to discuss? We're going to talk about one here in a second, but does anyone have an MOU that you've recently with any vendors or contractors? I know our food service, they have multiple MOUs with water suppliers, everybody from Deer Park, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and some of the big players there. And they try to just be redundant so that if one can't fill it, the other one does. But it's very important to have these. Very nerve-wracking too. You sometimes find out who's the stronger client, unfortunately, who's been the stronger client and who does more business. If you do millions of dollars of business with a client versus a hospital that may not, just goes to show you the power of a big system. We may get a preference to the agreement versus a hospital that's not as big. That's unfortunate, but again, in disaster management, you got to quantify and calculate all of that. Let's jump over to that group discussion, Lindsay. We'll lead through that. All right. I'm just looking back on what we were looking at here is our water. Let's talk about water. How much water do each of you need today? Okay. Let's calculate it. Let's figure it up. I'm going to get my pen out and we're going to calculate up. Let's start with drinking. Sean, how much water are you going to drink today at work?
I don't know. I mean, I hope to do a gallon, but you
Oh,
know,
geez.
3 or 4 quarts.
Okay, I'm gonna put a gallon. If I drank a gallon of water at work, I'd never get anything done. I'd be in the restroom all day. But let's say you're a healthy guy and you want to get your hydration, you're gonna drink a gallon of water.
Yeah, I'd say two
All right.
quarts. Yeah.
Okay. Now one of you guys out there with some plumbing background, tell me what's the gallon per minute flush rate on one of our toilets here, because if Sean drinks a gallon of water, he's gonna be going to the bathroom a lot. So how many gallons? Let's just say Sean's gonna go we're conservatively 4 times. How much water is they going to use in the restroom on these?
1.5 liters per flush.
The toilets are 3.5 gallons per flush
Oh wow,
in the hospital. Now your house is like a gallon and a half.
3.5, and Sean's gonna drink a gallon of water, so he's going
Yeah.
at least
Yeah,
4 times.
you're gonna
Use
flush
That
it
is
up.
14 gallons of water. Okay. All right. Now, what about did Sean go to eat lunch? Did he go down to the cafeteria and get some lunch, right? So
Sure
and
did.
he got some grits, right? He got some soup. So
For
let's think
lunch?
about that. Let's just say a gallon of water just to prepare Sean's food today. Right? Good Lord. Sean, you're such a you're not helping the environment,
What
Sean.
am I?
You're using so
I'm
much
a
water.
killer for the earth. Golly.
Exactly.
Good
Now
Lord.
you've ate all them grits and you've ate all that fiber, right? Now we're going back to the bathroom again. So now you guys know there's a lot more water. If Sean was a surgeon, he's got to have them instruments, and them instruments got to get cleaned, you got to get sterilized. If it's cold as it is today outside, and you look behind me and it's still cloudy and cold here, we're running a lot of water through them boilers. And I don't know how much, we can't even describe, but just Sean's physical usage of water is over 16 gallons. Actually, it's closer to 20 gallons of water. Okay. Now, how many people are in your building today? Wherever you're building, Matt, you said you're there at the orthopedic hospital. How many people are in that building? Right. How many people are at Presbyterian? How many people are at, there any given day at Presbyterian Medical Center, there could be any given moment, there could be anywhere between 1,800 and 2,300 humans in that campus at any given time during the day on a normal day. Times that times 20 gallons.
40,000.
Yeah, there you go. So
Look at
this
that.
is the group discussion. This is what you want to look at when you're figuring your 96-hour plan, so that if we run into a water disruption, we have to immediately shut down consumption and load. So we're going to have to start shedding. We can't prevent people from drinking. We can't prevent people from using the restroom. These are all things that are going to have to be critical, but we can start shedding surgery. We can start shedding food service to the public, go to emergency meals, go to emergency things. And that's why, and there's, you guys have that in your facilities, utilities outage plan underwater. There's a couple of these that describe how many liters or how many gallons of water per day you should figure on, and that needs to be incorporated in your 96-hour plan. All right. I think I'm always a little bit shocked to realize how much you really use in a day. And I'm down here and I'm drinking water and I've been drinking coffee and I've went to the red. Like I'm sitting here thinking about it. I'm halfway through my day here, and I guarantee you, if the standard flush rate, like you were talking about, I'm at that 10-gallon consumption already. So it's just amazing how much water we burn. All right, let's take a look. Is this one, again, Lindsay, I'm going to lean on you again. Is this one you're going to be able to share, or do I need to try to find that and pull that up?
Yeah, I can share that. I do want to clarify though, this says a memorandum of understanding with Davis Water. Chip
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Chip said it's actually a contract. So
Contract.
it is not an MOU.
Yeah. And that's a big difference.
Yeah.
And that's a little better, formidable because of the contractual agreement. Will, go ahead.
So I'm real big on the contractual agreements, because no matter what, if you do an MOU with a industry or any kind of vendor, yes, that's well and good for like what Kip said, small incidents. But when you put us against other major conglomerates within the healthcare industry, how much do we stack up? Will we
Yeah.
be the first one to the dinner table when it comes
Yeah.
down to it?
Yeah.
So
And that's a
by
good way
doing
to
a
look at it.
yeah, by doing a contract, you guarantee your seat at the table. A MOU is just a handshake agreement kind of thing, and MOUs are amazing for smaller incidents, but disasters, you need to get those contracts
Yeah.
solidified.
And that's one that we've certainly used before, even preemptively, is we'll bring Davis's agreement or contract into place and they'll pre-stage water tankers just in the event that it goes down because there's been something going on.
I
Is
have
that a chance to find that or?
I found it. I'll bring it up in a second. I did want to share just to underscore what you're saying. I have worked with the healthcare system, their children's hospital in Dallas. And in 2021 and in 2022, they had these incredible ice storms that came in. I don't know if you remember hearing about that on the news, but it definitely took out Texas and a large part of the Southeast and even where I was in Arkansas. And they were without power for a long time. They simply do not have the infrastructure to accommodate that or the machinery to accommodate that. And they were getting very, very low on their fuel. And they had an MOU with a fuel provider, and they simply refused to come out because of the conditions. They said it's not worth our own safety. And we're talking about pediatric patients. This is a children's hospital under really critical condition, trauma one center, and it's incredible. Like under extreme circumstances, they can deny fulfilling that MOU,
Right.
should they feel like they have to.
And Lizzie, to your example, that's still going on. They're still trying to set up the critical infrastructure for that. Now, they did go back and during an after action review say that if they would have had a contingency plan or a contractual agreement with that supply company instead of an MOU, it may have went a different way. But at the end of the day, the kids suffered, the community suffered because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really dependent on, we often say this, I often say this offline. I may not say this to a surveyor. I say we are fortunate to have the power of a system, but we're blessed as well because we do have the bargaining power to negotiate contracts and things to where if it's emergency fuel supplies or if it's emergency water or food, we certainly carry a larger weight. But again, when you're looking at it from an industry standpoint, it's all about the contract versus an agreement. All right. Let's take a look now. Now, this document, I've over the years when it was first developed, has a lot of formula in it. I found it to be tough. Now, this is an opinion. So again, for what my opinion matters, I just know that I took the original forms. This was an example of a 96-hour sustainability or 96-hour plan form that was developed at Novant Health. Matt Merritt helped develop this. It has the full spreadsheet has a lot of formulary in it that calculates those burn rates based on the information you guys provided. How much fuel does the generator burn at full load? How much fuel do we have? And then it would calculate how many days. Now, I walked into a number of meetings and a number of regulatory and review sessions with this full spread of documents, 8 printed on 11 by 18 paper. And man, I'm not a math major, right? My degree's in criminal justice. And let me tell you something, we took math, but we didn't take a lot. Okay. So when I got down to describing this, I just simply had to say in plain terms, this is how much fuel we have. This is how much fuel we burn. and this is the calculation. So I decided to sort of scale the thing down and make it a much more simple form. And I really encourage you to do that as well. They're easy to keep up with. They're easy to show an incident commander, a facility leader, and say, ma'am or sir, this is how much fuel we have, this is our burn rate, and this is how long we got until we're in a problem. And here's what I'm doing to mitigate that. So when you look at it, we talk about the major things that are consumables or consumables. In this case, it's fuel, it's water, it's food. We've got some in there around potable water that we station on site that's drinking water. Now, we're never going to have enough drinking water stored on site, no matter what we do. We just don't have that kind of space, but we want to get through a day. If we can just get through a day and then invoke our Davis agreements and invoke our MOUs, we can bring in trucks, we can bring in pallets. But I've encouraged all of our leaders that we do emergency management to at least have a day's worth of potable water, bottled, canned, now that we're going to longer shelf lives, and then whatever you deem appropriate. Paper goods, cleaning supplies. If you want to get to the minutiae in this and you have nothing more to do, and I know you don't because I know you're busy, and you want to get to every little detail, I just try to go with the stuff like when I'm thinking about what do I need to survive? I need shelter, I need water, I need food, I need protection. That's all I need. Okay. So when you're thinking about your list, keep it simple. Lindsay, if you'll tab over to the inventory list, there's also going to be things that we would have on hand to help us through. And this has always been something that they like to see. And I'm talking from a regulatory perspective here. And if you meet the regulatory, you're going to meet the real world needs and vice versa. So don't get caught up with regulatory. You know, Matt, to your point, don't be panicking. Well, I don't think I have a buzzer on my generator that goes off after 4 days. No, but you've got a darn good plan, and that's going to take care of the regulatory requirement. And let's not work it backwards. Let's say, here's things that we felt were important enough to put on this EM inventory to show how we would be operating, how many cots we have, decontamination suits, maybe 5-gallon buckets for force flushing a toilet if we needed to, and then a few other things like training equipment and others so that they can see we take emergency management serious, we have supplies, and here's how much our burn rates. If you'll go back to the first tab, and I'll end our conversation on this, I want to get your input, is you'll see there for potable water, 0.2 days. You know, so that's something we've increased. So the 2025 HVA or 96 hours is going to show an increase because we purchased more water for there. But as you can see on diesel for boilers and other things, we're exceeding at that facility. We're exceeding the 96 hours. We're actually, if I'm reading that correct, the generator tanks that are current there now are going to push for 9 days. So, you know, not every hospital has that. Not every hospital has that capability, but this is one way of demonstrating that. Okay, I'm gonna pause there. We've talked a lot on this subject. It's an important subject, but what questions or concerns do you guys have? And I appreciate the findings or perspectives you all have as well. Okay. All right. All right. After lunch, we'll get the carbs. We'll get the carbs going here. We'll get woke. All right. Incident management. What's an incident? We've talked about it, but give us an example. Someone give me an example of an incident, not imaginary, but one you've actually managed in your house. I saw Steve's chat a while ago. He's managing an HR incident, sounds like. But what is an incident that you've managed in your career, in your respective profession, whether here or somewhere else? Could be at the house. I got a new grill one year for Father's Day because my wife caught ours on fire in the carport and had to use our fire extinguisher. That was a pretty good incident. I had to manage. Nothing like a phone call from an 8-year-old girl going, "Dad, Mom's got your fire extinguisher and the grill's on fire." And I go, "Pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep." That's all I remember saying. But what's an incident that someone's managed there locally?
Hey, Kip,
Yep.
sometimes public safety likes to reboot the card access system,
There you go.
which knocks down all of our med rooms and supply rooms and whatnot. So we have to kind of, my end of the deal is getting everything unlocked and accessible for them while the card access is down.
That's right. See, Brian's throwing a shot there. You know, he's throwing
I would never, I would never.
exactly. But you know, an incident is one of those acute situations that requires an immediate action, and he's exactly right. So dependent, like our other conversation, electronics, computers, and then we drop a system down where you got to go back to keys and locks. We don't have keys and locks. We got electronic keys and locks. So now there's an emergency because the nurse can't get to the medication she needs for patients. So great mitigation there. Now they have keys to those med rooms stored in little lock boxes all over the hospital so that Brian doesn't have to, manage that incident and go around and get every door open or rekeyed or keyed for the first time, or a key, because that didn't exist. So manage an incident and then definitely prevent it in the future. But any other incidents? I think we have a slide there that just talks about an emergency or disaster caused by either that human or natural, but we just want to get you sort of, because we're getting ready to get into incident management and how we do it. Okay. Anything to add to that before we move into, we're going to build up to an exercise here in just a little bit, but we want to give you a crash course in incident management.
Kip, we had, remember a couple years ago with the generator out in the belt deck? It
Oh,
leaked,
yeah.
And
yeah.
it leaked all over the doctors' cars underneath the belt deck. And we learned from that. And I was part of the team that responded right away along with public safety. But now we've changed things to where you can't leave a generator alone whenever it's running. And, that whole area underneath has been replaced with, looks like some kind of alarm system with the plates underneath. So if it does leak, we'll know.
Yeah.
So some things have changed since then, and we learned.
Yeah, great example. Here was something where it was human and it was technical.
Yep.
We had humans pushing fuel and running testing, but little did we know that a valve or I remember a hose or a valve, something had failed, and this thing's pushing fuel because it thinks it's out. Well, it's not out. It's just not registering it because it's dumping it on the ground. And next thing you know, you've got cars damaged, you've got streams and creeks. So you got an EPA emergency, you got a full incident, and a lot learned. Now you go in there and you see catchment basins with alarms in it. We've got all kind of fail safes. So it sounds like you changed the entire process of how that's generator testing's done. So it's to mitigate, but then, heaven forbid, there'll be something else that we discover,
Right.
Striving to be perfect. So good example. Well, in the incident management world, now that we know what an incident is and how it can affect, we want to teach you about the incident command structure. So here's the acronyms again. Get ready. There's ICS, the incident command system. And this will be the structure we talk about, but you'll know as the incident command system. You'll also hear it referred to as HICS, Hospital Incident Command System, which is, again, unique to the healthcare. So the names would be things in there, medical technical specialist and other things that you wouldn't use out in the fire world. Where does this system come from? Well, if you've done your FEMA training and you've done your 100, 200 series on incident command, you'll know it started in California with the wildfires back in the old days, not the ones recently, but back in the day. And it started because they needed a unified structure to manage these growing incidents and these growing disasters. So they put this together and it's been tried and true and it works. But we want to give you a crash course here. There's not a test. And I'd like to get an input from some of you guys that have been involved. Now, you may have not been in the first level, which is the command structure. So in the command area, of an incident management system or incident command system is the command table. At that, you have an incident commander. You'll also have a liaison officer that communicates with all parties involved, including inside and outside. You'll have one of the most important positions, a safety officer, that's making sure that we're not doing anything that's more harmful than the event itself. And then you'll have a public information or communications officer. That's the spokesman that'll communicate internally and externally. So that's the command table. Let's put it in simple terms. That's just the command structure for how we work now. It's an org chart. So in plant engineering, right? Let's just start at the top. In plant engineering, you've got Matt Steen, Senior Vice President. He's up there at the command. He's going to have folks that are, again, going to communicate, going to help him support. And then there's going to be all the operations down below that are running day to day. So the next thing you see are the operations areas, and they're broke out into 4 categories. Direct operations, which again, those are frontline team members that are running things. This is where you might have been in an incident. I know Steve's been there before and has been in that, and he's been the plant engineering system operations, or he might have been one of the lead protective services officers that were running operations for an incident. Most times when you stand up an ICS for a management of an incident, it's going to happen very quickly, and these are the first things that are going to get filled because work's got to get done. If the work continues and it's a sustained event that goes on like COVID for days, weeks, months, years, you're going to need a logistics branch that'll stand up, each of these represented by these unique colors. Logistics will stand up and they'll just help keep you supplied. Like you had enough water for today, but then you're going to need more for next week. And logistics comes in and just helps keep us filled, and we fill those positions as normal. Looking at Novant structure, who is our logistics every day? Who does that for us at Novant Health? Come on, don't be an supply chain. That's supply chain, right? So again, all this exists every day. There's a president of your hospital. There's a chief nursing officer of your hospital. We have communications and media relations. But this will be stood up specific to an incident, specific to whatever we're managing acutely or in the moment. Planning is just that. That's long-term. Staffing, other things that might fall underneath that. And then finance. Finances, we got to pay for it. And I'm not worried about it in the beginning. Like we were pulling triggers on that fuel spill that Sean was talking about, and we didn't know what to do it. So we were just making phone calls to Clean Harbors. We were making phone calls to external vendors. We were making calls to local fire department for logistical support and other things. But at some point, you're going to have to pay for it. All right. So this is a typical 101 crash course in the incident command system. And this is the structure: command staff, and then operations and below. Let's take a look at, again, National Incident Management System, another acronym. If you don't love them, God bless you, because that's all we do in emergency management is use acronyms. There's NIMS, which is the National Incident Management System, the one developed out of California originally, and then HICS, the Hospital Incident Command. So this is giving you an idea of what that looks like. This is a typical structure that would stand up. Now I want to ask, who outside of the guys that I know, because I've been there, I've done it with you, you've been in that command. I've had the privilege to serve as an incident commander, a deputy incident commander, a safety officer, and then I've been in operations as the chief security officer, handling the security and safety of the facility while, a CNO or a hospital president or vice president was the incident commander. Who's been in this structure before that you see there on the screen? Give us an example. And if you haven't, it's not a matter of if or a matter of when. It's just a matter of, or rather if when, if you're in healthcare, you're going to be in a part of this no matter what. You might be again, if you're an electrician, you might be the guy out there at the generator handling the problem with a vendor, but you're going to be part of this team and part of that structure.
Hey, Kip, to help the team out, just to get the ball rolling, we utilize this as a system through Hurricane Helene. Helene's response
Absolutely.
at a much larger scale, but this was the basis of what we used.
100%. So Helene introduced us to something that we were not familiar with. We were familiar with getting prepared for hurricanes. We were prepared with responding to hurricanes and keeping Novant going. But the organization had a bigger goal. Our senior leaders, executives, and physicians wanted to help people in North Carolina. And for us to do that, that meant we turned into a response organization. So the recommendation was made by myself, let's use the ICS structure to manage that. You know, we can get the logistics we need, we can get the support we need, we got finance to know how we're going to pay for it. We'll have the liaison officers to the state and other hospitals, safety officers to make sure we're not doing nothing too crazy. And then we're going to need labor pools under operations and help to do it. And the organization did a great job, helped hundreds, literally thousands of people in the mountains during that by using that system to manage it for about 6 weeks, sustained operations before that started to scale down. Any other examples or any others? All right. Command center slide there, Lindsay.
I was going to say, Kip, I know we used it during the civil unrest and some other incidents we've
During
had.
events. Yep.
We had a lot of administration people on site. Rotated yourself, Jamie Feinauer, a lot of people from both teams.
Always using it during that's one of your human events where you had demonstrations protesting, large scale events there post incident. This was due to some social unrest. Every storm, whether it's pre or post, major power outages. Last night, a command center was stood up by DPS. Fortunately, it didn't get to everyone else because most people were just using their downtimes and it was at night, so that's good. Anytime you have a downtime, it's better at night than during the day. But we use it quite a bit. All right. Command centers. All right. Again, how much you guys want to focus on this, just know that we typically want to pre-identify them. They're going to be spaces that allow us to communicate, phone, video, computers, but it's really a pre-identified. Most hospitals will have a pre-identified command center, but sometimes that command center might be affected because the problem's at the hospital, so it might have to go off-site. But for the most part, I would, if I'm a betting man, most of us on this call, and again, I get involved in that sometimes just because of my role, but for most of us on the call, we're going to be on the operations side. We're going to be out making things happen in the field, taking care of business, liaising with partners, fixing the issues or responding to them. But again, it's generally in a pre-identified area. Let's talk about the responsibilities of the incident commander, because here in a moment, you're going to get a chance to do that. We're going to talk a little bit about that. I think we run a little exercise here coming up. But the incident commander is your chief operating officer, just like you have now. You all have a chief operating officer, whether it's at your hospital or if it's in your division. Everybody's got a boss, right? Even Carl Motto, the CEO of the organization, has a board, overarching board. And the incident commander just sort of runs the incident, but not alone. You have all the support personnel. He or she's making decisions based on it, and it's just a standard org chart. I don't want to over talk it, just want you to have awareness. But if you've ever taken the FEMA courses that are online, and that's the ICS 100 and 200, going to take you about 3 to 4 hours of your time to complete those 2 courses. But once you're done, you're going to be a subject matter expert on ICS and its structure and how it scales up and down for incidents. The longest one I've ever been involved in my career was COVID, and we kept that ICS structure up for about 36 months continuously, stood it down and then brought it back up for a few months and then took it back down. So it can be 3 hours, it can be 3 days, or in that case, having lived through a global pandemic, it was, 36 months. So it's scalable to what you need. All right. Little Joint Commission DNV slide there for you to talk through. If you have any questions or concerns, this is now your material, your reference material, so you can come back and take a look at it and give you an idea of these requirements and how a hospital has to demonstrate that we utilize that EOP for our communications and that we have an established ICS. All right. We're jumping into the next one. Any questions on that? Any questions on ICS? And just know it's an org chart. Leader, leadership support, and then all the operators, all the guys that are getting it done, guys and girls that are getting it done. I want to go back and talk about how important it is for your division. Those power and generator issues that we talked about, and those ones that were really big, where power was out. I guess you call that a bus duct failure. I think water might have got on it or something, but it blew a bus duct, and the replacement of that, you guys know more about this than I do. You just can't go buy one of those. The size bus duct that we're talking about for the whole hospital, you can't just go pick one of those up at Ace Hardware. So it took days to get it here, and then the generator started failing because fans and all that. The most important person in that command center was not the incident commander. It was Mike DiGaetano, because Mike was the operations lead for plant engineering that was managing the very crisis. So he was the subject matter expert that brought in. Now, if that was a security event like the civil unrest, plant engineering's got a great role in that, but it might be, but for that particular role, it was so important. So much information that he had and was able to say, here's how much generators we've got to get our hands on. Here's how much power we need. Here's how it's going to cut over. And then we literally cut over to portable generators that were brought on site to run that hospital. It was insane. A little PTSD coming back from that one, Steve. That was a pretty rough deal. All right.
Yeah, I've never seen anything like that one.
Yeah, that's just a nightmare scenario, because we were this close to evacuating that hospital. And it was just that close.
Yeah, Joy still talks about it too.
Yeah. Everybody still talks about that one. That's like that old. That's like COVID. Our kids will have to hear us talk about COVID until the day we go, and that was one that we still talk about. All right. Asset and resource management. So again, requirements for this around what we've talked about. The EOP's got to include this on how we manage those. We go back and remember the MOUs, the contractual agreements, and other things. And then let's go over to that asset inventory slide, Lindsay. So if you're managing emergency management for your organization, and we're wanting to give you enough information to absolutely do that and be in a position to speak with authority on it, what are some things that you're going to want to track? Later on today, we're going to talk about sensitive areas in the security management section. We as an organization are told we have to identify what is sensitive that we're going to put extra protection on, okay? And we do that. But when it comes to asset inventory, you have to decide in your EOP, and you have to decide in your plans what's important enough for you to track and keep account of. And since we're hospital operators, we have to think about everything. We're a clinic or a business office. Power goes out, what do? It's close. We just close and send everybody home and
Go
cancel
home, that's right.
appointments, right? Some of them have gens, but most don't. But at a hospital, we got to think about it. So that's just give you a sort of a talking point there about how we would do that, and how we would what we would be tracking. So all this is leading up to our group exercise that we're going to get into and spend. I think we've got several minutes allotted out for this, don't we, Lindsay? Pretty good bit. 10, 15 minutes.
Let me just confirm that.
Because I know we're about 10 minutes before the hour, so we're gonna get you broke here on time.
Yeah. So this is the last thing that we have to do before we go on break.
Okay.
So we've got an incident as part of your homework one. So if you go back to that document for emergency management, it says homework on it. The same one that you were using before. There will be a section that describes an incident at New Hanover Regional Medical Center. You will use that incident. It's right here. You will use this incident to stand up your incident command center.
So if everybody will take it, I mean, we've obviously been focused. I think you guys, without even knowing it, you identified that electricity and generators were one of your main concerns in your HVA. Well, guess what? I'm going to let you read that. And then the next slide, we're going to start naming some positions, and we're going to stand up a quick incident command system based on what you know with an incident commander and some associated roles. And then we're just going to work through this as we lead into the break. So take a read on that real quickly. It sounds like a bad Tuesday, right? Sounds like a bad day, any day of the week if you're in engineering. So let's go over to our command structure real quick. All right, right out of the gate, I want to ask for someone to volunteer, and I don't want to volunteer, but let's just get a volunteer for this particular incident that's going on, and it happened at 10 o'clock at night. So who's going to be our incident commander for this? And we're going to use some of the basic tools that we've learned so far. Who wants to be the incident commander for this event? Don't worry, won't be too hard on you. Come on, someone's itching to be that. Casey, I don't want to call anybody out, but I'm looking at you. You look like you're anxious. You look like, man, I want to volunteer for this, and I just don't know how to say I want to. So, Casey, you want to volunteer to be the incident commander?
Yeah, really no, but
well, you know what they say, the best way to learn how to swim is just jump in the river, right? So with Casey being the incident commander here, if you're the incident commander, let's help him out. What is the first thing that an incident commander who's been asked to come in, stand up the command center in the predetermined location, what's the first thing he wants to know about this incident? What would you want to know, Casey? What does this team, and help him out, what would you want to know if you're running now hospital operations at an acute care hospital with 100 beds? All right, you got a 100-bed hospital, and this incident's just happened. What's one of the first things you're going to want to know?
based off what the incident summary we just read.
Yep.
So yeah, making sure we know what the situation is, and then start calling in the resources that we need.
That's exactly right. The incident commander is not going to go out. So you're no longer, no matter what your role was before, if you're the incident commander, you're not going to be the boots on the ground that goes out and fixes the problem. You're going to now manage fixing the problem. And the first thing I got to know, what's the problem? I need a full briefing on what has happened. So I'm going to gather all the subject matter experts around, and I'm going to ask for a briefing. I need an incident briefing, so I need the top technical expert in the room. That would be, again, a senior person of your plant engineering team, maybe your electrician, if you have one on site, or your leader. and I need to get a full briefing so I know what I'm dealing with. So that'd be the first thing out of the gate. Now that I know what the problem is, as a healthcare organization, what is my main priority? What is my main focus? Again, there you go. Patients and patient safety and team members, don't get me wrong, but patient safety and patient operations. So I want to know, what's my census? Do I got patients on the table? And then what do we need to get safe? And that's when I would appoint the next position. I would make sure I appointed a safety officer. So again, if I'm dealing with an electrical problem, would I choose a nurse to be my safety officer? No, I'd probably choose a subject matter expert to be my safety officer. If environmental health and safety is not available for those of us that work in Novant, the Piedmont, Greater Charlotte, Greater Winston market, your Russell Bagleys, your Will Spates, your David Clowers, right? Safety officers that can, keep us from making crazy decisions, or whoever that is for your coastal region. I just don't know those guys to be able to call them by name like I do the environmental health and safety guys here in the Piedmont and the Triad. I got to start getting these new names, Charlotte, Triad, region names that we're using now. All right. So that'd be right out of the gate. I want a full briefing, how many patients, what I got going on. Let me ask you a question. Do I need to appoint a finance guy in the first hour of this operation? Do I need finance at the table?
I would, no, sir. But
say again, Sean, I'm sorry.
I would not be concerned about that at that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would not be concerned as much about finance and planning as I would be operations. So as the incident commander, Casey, now that you know the problem, who are you going to lean to help fix the problem? And then what's the next question you would ask after doing that? Anybody jump in there? Again, team sport here. He might, incident commander never is alone. The incident commander's got advisors. He's got folks that are giving him or her advice about what. But now that you know the problem, and now that you know you got people working on the problem, what would be the question you'd want to know?
How it happened.
Yeah, well, that, Brian, that's important, but that's more of an after incident. That's an after action. It might be good to know, but it's not how it happened. I want to know how. Go ahead, Casey.
Well, I was gonna say, I would think time frame.
There you go. How long? That was it. That's how long is it going to take to fix this? How long is it before we get back to normal operations? And what can I, as the incident commander, I'm the bulldozer here. I'm the guy that's going to remove barriers for you so that if you come in there and said, well, we're going to need, well, what do you need? Well, we need to get more electricians in here. We need to get Caterpillar in here with a portable blankety blank. We need to get whoever your vendor is. Then you have that authority to say, get that resource, or call the chain of command to activate, because you're all about trying to get back. Okay.
Okay, but I was thinking about the last section about finance, and when we had COVID, we didn't have to have somebody there right away, but it ended up costing us some money in the end because we didn't do a good job tracking some of our HEPA filters and stuff. And we brought in probably thousands of those things.
That's true.
So then we're paying bills for, equipment that we didn't even know if we got in the first place because we never tracked all the assets initially.
So that would go back into the incident versus an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
So the incident, you wouldn't necessarily need a finance individual into your command center, but for elongated situations, absolutely, because you're going to pay for it 10 times over down the road if you do not have a finance liaison present, along with a scribe. Those two individuals.
Well, you're hitting on the point. I think we as operators, we try to put the fire out. We're not worrying about how much water we've used. We're not worrying about how much hose we've destroyed. We're just trying to put the damn fire out, period. That's my goal. Get your power restored. Get your water restored. And then we'll figure out how to pay for it. But with the incident command system, by activating all of these, you can focus on just that. Casey's worried about patience and how long it's going to take. And that's his priority as the incident commander. But my planning section chief and my finance section chief, they're tracking that information so that when FEMA says we can reimburse you some of that because we're going to have declared an emergency, or we hope the governor, president, whoever, finance is tracking how many HEPA filters we bought in that situation. In this case, how much did it cost to rent them portable generators from Caterpillar? How much did that contract cost us when we activated, I don't know, do we still use Tar Heel Electric? That's an old name. I don't even know if we still use them or not. But whoever that electrical contractor is, and we paid them hundreds of thousands of dollars to come help us, it's going to be good to know that so we can turn that information in. But at the moment, you don't need to know that. Now, I know enough to be dangerous because I've been doing it a long time. And you might be sitting there going, God, I want no part of this incident command system. Man, we're teaching you everything. Man, we're giving you the whole smash here. And you're not going to have to worry about the whole smash. Again, you might just be in the logistics, or I'm sorry, in the operations section as running your program out there, running your show. So don't get overwhelmed. Try not to get overwhelmed with the scale. Just know it's just like running your business every day, except there's been an emergency like Brian talked about. Brian's doing locksmithing duties every day. But then when something major happened, he's got to do 100 of them right now, that becomes an incident. And he's going to need help. And Casey's the incident commander here, but he's not by himself. He's got a lot of help around him. All right. What questions do you have? And again, we're right on that break time, so we're going to honor that and get you to it before we come back and finish strong in an hour on the emergency management side. But how many of you, by show of hands, and please be candid, I'll be honest, because I don't know. I know some of you, because like I said, I've worked with you and enjoyed that over the years. But how many of you have ever seen the incident command system, or is this the first time you've been exposed to it, even here on the charts and stuff? Anybody? First time? Seth, first time for Gary?
No, I've seen it before. Sorry.
Yeah. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but it's really just forgive some of my slangs. It's how I teach some of my administrators when they're coming in there, and these administrators that are these like high-powered chief nursing officers or chief operating officers, and I'm thinking they know everything under the sun, and they feel like they're uncomfortable. And I look at them and I go, you do this every day. You run a hospital every day. This is just running a hospital on crack. I mean, it's just everything's blowing up. Nothing's working, no water. And now you got to run a hospital with no water. So you know who I'd be calling? Your plant engineering director or your plant engineering manager. I'd be getting them in here in the command center and get you a briefing so you know what the heck's going on, because I don't know how to run. I don't know where the water comes from. I just know we got water. So, but I need subject matter experts like y'all to come in and start telling me how we're going to fix this and when we're going to get back to normal. And then liaising with Duke Energy, liaising with Charlotte Water, New Hanover Water, or Wilmington Water, whoever your water supplier there is, and getting me some answers that I can use to then inform my community and inform my hospital of what's going on. But you ain't got to do that either. PIO does that. So anyway. All right. That was a crash course. Man, that felt tough for me, but I know this stuff. But man, you're getting a crash course in ICS, and that was it. Any questions before we take a break? Lindsay, how long is our breaks here on these little short?
If we could, I mean, here we maybe could take five minutes. If we need more, please let me know. But I figure we come back 10 after the hour.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, everybody grab you something to drink or go use that. Sean, I think you got one more restroom break, a calculated water usage, so you go take care of that.
And I'll be still online throughout the break. So if anyone has any questions or any concerns or any follow-up questions for what we just went over, I can expand further on that while the break is going on.
Good deal. We'll be back here in just a few minutes. All right, we'll give it just a moment here and then we'll get started back. All right, I think we've got most of the players rejoined here, and got a few. See, Matt's already or Seth's already using the right language. So he's dealing with an incident. Hopefully, that won't be a protracted incident. He's standing up an incident command system, but I know how it goes. So we're going to jump into our next section here around emergency procedures. So part of your emergency management plans as an emergency manager, and that's what you all here today to learn about, part of that emergency management, is there has to be procedures that are available to all the team members specific to certain incidents and emergencies. Here at Novant Health, we utilize a quick reference guide, a QRG. I believe we have a slide on that coming up here, where we identify a certain number of incidents that we have plans in place or plans in place to deal with, things that you might expect, obviously. And Lindsay, I think that's that next slide.
Did you want to have a discussion here or do you want to skip the discussion?
Yeah, I guess I sort of forgot we were having a discussion over this. What we're looking for here, team, is we definitely, from the technical standpoint, we've definitely given electrical outage its time today. But what are some other types of emergencies before we get into an exhaustive list, or at least the list that Novant is putting down? What are some emergencies that we need to be prepared and have a plan to respond to from an emergency management perspective?
We had the fire there at MMC, but just construction related incidents.
So fire, 100%, 100% fire. Construction related fire and that was terrifying. The video alone on that was terrifying of how quickly that erupted because of the accelerant and the waterproofing material that was involved there. I've never seen a video that was more sort of heart pounding than that one, because that could have got real bad real quick. So fire, what's others?
Is this only plant engineering related, or would like a mass?
No.
be-
A good point, Brian, is you definitely will have the expertise to hone in on what you believe is around your area and your scope of service. But think holistically. What are some emergencies that a hospital need to be prepared for?
Like if a bus was to wreck and you had a bunch of people on it, they had to have an influx of people.
Yep. 2 words, influx and MCI. So we use the term MCI, again, acronyms, and it can be multi-casualty incident, or some people call it mass casualty incident. Novant uses, we make that even more complicated. We say things like multi-casualty incident in the community. That's how we say it in our plans. But you're absolutely right. You're a hospital. You got to be prepared for an influx of patients. What are some other things we need to be prepared for here at a hospital?
Weather.
Weather. Nothing affects us worse. I just can't, I don't know. We in the South, I guess we do heat pretty well. But I tell you, when it comes to snow, ice, and then there's hurricane, like we get it all here. And we have to be prepared for it. But, if I had a nickel for every time I heard one of my colleagues that is from, Michigan, Ohio, upstate New York, these guys, and they laugh at us when we're getting all hot and bothered over 4 inches of snow. I said, 4 inches of real snow can cripple a city in the South. So yeah, we got to be prepared for weather. Others? All right. Well, we're getting ready to get into it. We're just going to go through, and not only do we have to have the procedures, if you're in an accreditation and regulatory session, you're going to be asked, how do we educate? How do we inform our team? And that's not just your team, the entire team. And the last I heard, Novant Health now, with all the places where we're at, we're in the neighborhood of 40,000 team members. So when you're thinking about how do you educate and inform 40,000 individuals on what our plans and processes are, obviously we have annual mandatory education that you have to do. We have policies and a policy holder, I think PSTAT for New Hanover area, Novant document manager for some of the Triad and Charlotte market. And then I'm sure South Carolina has their own form. I don't even know what that is yet. Hadn't even got that far yet. Don't know where they keep all that. But we also have quick reference guides that Novant uses. So we try to lay out the most important. It's not all inclusive, but it's the ones we think are the most important to give you the ABCs. What do you do in the beginning to an emergency? What's the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, as it were? So the quick reference guide is one way that we do that at Novant Health, and we offer that to our accreditation and regulatory bodies that survey us as evidence of our plans, our processes, and here's how we educate the team on them. We post these on the units and the departments, and we tell them to reference them until they're given further instructions. All right, let's jump into them. So cyber attacks. Now, in 1992, when I joined the organization, I assure you, we did not discuss, nor was this included in any protective services or security policy in 1992. The computers we had back then were computers with name only. I'm not sure how they even worked, but this was pre-Windows. This was pre-electronic medical record. Medications were given out on paper and were logged on paper. There was absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with a computer. And if you even had a computer, and very few did, cyber attacks were not a big deal. So look how much that's evolved. Ransomware, phishing attacks, viruses. There's words out there, spam, scam. There's words out there I don't even know that folks are doing on that. So that's one of the things there that we deal. Who will admit getting caught? Who will admit to clicking on the link and then you getting the thing going, surprise, this was a test by DPS. You just, cost the company $2 million.
Oh man, my first month, it asked me to change my password, and I was like, all right.
Yeah. 100%. Those DPS guys are sneaky. They send those out all the time. So if I see something, I've literally missed payment on things and gotten in trouble because I thought it was some kind of phishing attack, and I just deleted it and come to find out it was a legitimate bill. But that's how paranoid I've gotten on that. All right. Will, talk to us a little bit about violent individuals, and then we'll talk about active shooter next.
All right, a violent individual acts as a way that communicates threats and is hostile or presents an immediate danger to team members, patients, or visitors. Activate panic alarms if equipped. Call your emergency number and report a violent individual situation. Provide the following information to CCOM: the location, the description of the situation, description of person or persons, weapon involved. Make sure to remain calm and do not take any actions to place yourself in danger. Isolate that area, remove non-essential persons from the area, close doors to protect patients and visitors.
So for some of you, if you've been that involved, and I know some of you may have not, some of you may be new to leadership, or you're still, you've been into business, but you've not been in these roles where you've had to deal with accreditation and regulatory bodies. And we hope this has gotten you better prepared for that, for, the emergency management session. There was a time when security management and the environmental care had to separate. They were separated. You had a standard just for security. That sort of folded into the environment of care right now, and a lot of it's under the emergency management section as well. But your hospital has to have plans for violence. Okay, now we're going to go into a little bit deeper of that in the next session when we're doing security management, but this is one where you have to have those procedures to deal with a violent individual. All right, before we go on,
You had a
Steve?
question?
Yeah, but I know when I was in public safety, we used to keep a security management book. Are we still doing that, or do I need to kind of encompass that into EOC committee? Or
No, we still do, Steve. We still are required to have that security management plan.
okay,
But there was a time, if I don't want to confuse you, maybe I've done it inadvertently, but there was a separate time where you guys know there's standards like utilities management, hazardous material, emergency management. There used to be a separate one just for security. And a lot of that stuff's been folded under, but we still have to keep all these, and that's the reason it's required that we have these individualized plans.
okay. Thank you.
Now, when you go to the next one, it's the highest denominator. We consider the highest denominator for violence. It's hard pressed to imagine anything worse than an active shooter, or as we're beginning to call it, active assailant. Active assailant encompasses people that are trying to cause mass harm that may not use a firearm. So we've seen that. We just saw that over the holidays there in New Orleans, where it was vehicle-borne. You had a vehicle-borne attack where a vehicle was being used to cause, death and major injury. We've seen it, knife, machete, improvised explosives. The Boston Marathon bombing was a high-scale active assailant using an improvised explosive and through a pressure cooker. So, there's different forms. So active assailant is our plan there. And this is something that I've not been in a security, or rather an emergency management session over the last 4 to 6 years that one of the first questions they asked me is, what are you doing for active shooter? What are you doing for planning on that? So again, policy, procedures, run, hide, fight, all the things that Novant does, exercise drills, etc. And that is one of the highest denominators. If we can teach you to respond to that, we know we've definitely got you to be able to respond to an individual acting violent or threatening. Here's the one that Brian mentioned earlier, the MCI, or mass casualty, multi-casualty, or patient influx. Man, I don't know what we hadn't seen. I've seen plane crashes, bus crashes, motor vehicle, chemical fires, chemical spills. One of the most interesting was foodborne illness. Now, you might think that's a slow burn, but we were working one night up at Presby, or I was at home, got called in on it. A local group of individuals, their food preparation methods were, let's just say, not very sanitary. And they ended up sending us, I think the final count was 41 patients over about 4 hours to an emergency department with foodborne illness, vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration. You can imagine 41 patients coming through over the course of 4 to 6 hours. It was something. It was something. You couldn't have found a portable potty in the greater Charlotte market by the time that thing was over, just because of the resources that had to come to bear to manage that. So
Was it from a restaurant or something?
Say again.
Was it from a restaurant?
No, it was a community event. This was the local Hmong community, and they had done some butchering of animals. And unfortunately, they got into some cleanliness issues, and it was shigellosis, I believe was the name of or maybe I'm wrong on that. That might be wrong. Don't quote me on that one. The actual virus, the actual contaminant, was quick acting. It acts within 2 to 4 hours of ingestion, and it infected this into almost the entire community. They are the local housing complex. So off of Albemarle Road. It was crazy, really. And they were the most appreciative folks I've ever known in my life. They were just so sweet and appreciative. But it just goes to show, you plan for a bus accident, you're thinking multi-casualty, trauma, broken bones, burns, cuts, head wounds, right? No, foodborne, 40 patients in the ED, So you got to be all hazards approach. The good old bomb threat. Through the 90s, I felt like we got a lot of these back in the day. It was a lot of prank, a lot of things, and we got to the future threats like cyber, Facebook threats, social media threats versus good old-fashioned bomb threats. Really saw these tail off post 9/11. Reason was, got more serious. You might have got a hand slapped or you might have got a talking to pre 9/11 on this. You pull this post 9/11, you're going to jail. So it was like we saw it reduced, but we still get them. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about missing person and then missing and abducted children, because these are things that we have to manage in healthcare as well.
Absolutely. So with missing person, inform other team members on the unit and follow directions from the unit leader. Make sure to search stairwells, corridors, public areas, restrooms, the patient's room, and etc. Contact your emergency number at the initial search and describe the missing person. If a missing person is activated for another unit, search your area and be alerted for the missing person. Contact protective services if a person is found matching the description of the missing person.
So,
yeah,
well, let me say this about missing persons. Not only do we have to worry about the abduction of someone, this could be an infant. We're starting to see it's not even evolving anymore. It's here. We're seeing a lot of trafficking. Some of it is child, some of it is adult, but we're seeing trafficking. So we literally could be managing a person that was abducted or taken from us that may have come in for treatment. But we also, what other patient population do we manage here in healthcare? What other patient population in terms of, age and mental capacity, right? We see a lot of the elderly, Alzheimer's, dementia, and other things. So we have to have these plans in place for folks that wander away, and it's important to have that. So overhead paging, searches, and things like that. But you don't think about this as much as an abduction of an adult, although we've seen that. We've seen domestic issues and we've seen trafficking issues where folks come in for treatment and then they, that person that's grooming them, or that person that's trying to traffic them, takes them out of the hospital, and we've reported those kind of things. But think about those that are confused, disoriented, and maybe an Alzheimer's patient. All right. Missing children and abducted child. Will?
All right. So the missing and abducted child procedures. The first is being alert. Alert the hospital protective services immediately if a child are missing or abducted. Check the area. Make sure you check all stairwells, utility rooms, closets. Secure the unit. Lock down the unit from visitors and hold all admissions and discharges unless emergent. And clear visitors. Staff placed at exits should clear every adult and infant child pair. And I would go to say, look for large size bags that can hold infants and things of that nature.
This is one of the plans that is a requirement of, I know, Joint Commission. Now, DNV, I'm not as familiar with. I've never been in a DNV accredited hospital, but this is one plan that is a must. You must have an infant protection plan within your emergency management or your security management documents and procedures, because clearly managing newborns and others is paramount for us. All right. Now I'm not going to talk. Y'all done took this class this morning, so I think I heard Will or someone was teaching you about hazardous materials and all that, and I was shocked when I came to work for a hospital on how much ethyl methyl bad stuff, and that's what I call everything that I don't know what it is or how to pronounce it, is I don't want it on me. I don't want to be near it. I don't need to smell it. It doesn't need to touch me. But it's amazing how many chemicals we manage in a hospital, up to and including nuclear radioactive material in some of our locations that have blood irradiators. So this one, I always felt like if there's a gap in a plan, since we don't have full-time hazmat operators working on site, there's the book, is since we don't have folks that are dedicated full-time hazmat level operators that can gear out and then have all the cleanup equipment, we depend on Clean Harbors. We depend on 911 and local hazmat response. I always felt like this could be something that could get us. We've seen formula or formalin, which is basically, a type of formaldehyde that's been spilled that will completely evacuate an area because of its noxious fumes. We've had sewage. We've had xylene up in the sterilization area that has caused harm. And then, Sean talked about earlier, diesel fuel and things like that. I'd rather swim in diesel fuel than be near xylene or formalin, right? Because it definitely will harm you, but it's not going to eat your skin off in a matter of moments. So, with all that said, this is one that we have to have a lot of plans in place for. And I feel like this is one that makes me nervous because the plans can sometimes not be enough. Decontamination. Regulatory requirements, we must have a plan in place to decontaminate patients that are coming in. Many of you help maintain your decontamination rooms. I know we have them at our emergency departments, our new construction. Your name's not Pierce, right?
Yeah, it's Dusty.
Dusty. That's what I said. It's Dusty. I knew. I was like,
Mike Jackson.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I knew you, and I was sitting there
Yeah.
going, I know the spelling. His name ain't Pierce.
Yeah.
But you maintain those, and you know how important those are. Now, are they used often? Well, thank God, no. But when you have someone coming in with the ethyl methyl bad stuff on them, it's good to have them, and it's good to know the water works, right? Because most of our decontamination does not require. Of course, we don't even have what these guys are wearing. Those are Class C suits. I'm sorry, Class A suits. We don't even have those. Fully contains SCBAs, the whole nine. Most of our decon is take off your clothes, get in that shower, wash yourself, and you're good. If we're getting into that level of decontamination, we're already behind the curveball, but we have those plans in place. All right. Who mentioned weather earlier? 100%. Class or F2 tornado hit Matthews a few years ago, took some of the roof off, scared the hell out of some people. We've seen it. I don't even want to think about the number of hurricanes we've managed at Novant Health over the years. Correct me if I'm wrong, the coastal, you guys lost a building one time, I understand. You had a building that was under construction or partially completed, and it destroyed a building. One of the hurricanes years ago. Am I
Florence.
right?
Yeah, Hurricane Florence.
Florence, yeah. Was that building partially constructed or under construction?
It was our brand new neuroscience tower, and it was probably 95% complete, and it got completely wiped.
Yeah. And if I know anything about building, what is it, C1 level construction or construction grade, construction for hospital, millions of dollars right there in property damage, let alone, if we have any human impact. So this is something we have to have robust plans in place for. And I know we have them, but I just don't know if you can ever fully prepare for those. And we've seen a lot. Severe weather, this is another one where here in the south, that might be thunderstorms, that might be severe winds. It could be winter weather that's severe enough to activate our plans, things like rental cars. Um, I think water infiltration is, I've been told, Matt Steen's often told me that wind damage is wind damage, but the most money that Novant spends for storm damage is due to water. Whether it's infiltration of storm water or rain or flooding, if you will. So he tells me that's always the worst. So when we see a rain event, especially like what we saw in the last few hurricanes, that's going to be the toughest ones to
Yeah,
manage.
I think I spent $250,000 just in the 3 years I've been in Matthews on repairs related to water intrusion. And I'm quoted for another 1.5 million to fix the balconies that are getting water into the building.
Steve, I tried to help you on those balconies. I recommended that they remove them and not build the new ones, but
Yeah, cut them off.
got overrode on that one. The
Appreciate the
aesthetics
effort.
were more than they were counted more than the others. But I say it's sort of like a sunroof. I'm going to use that concept here. I think we all understand that. Sunroofs leak.
Yep.
I'm not sure having a sunroof on my car is worth the benefit is outweighs the negative of that. So I say don't cut a hole in a perfectly good roof or the side of your building if you don't have to.
Exactly.
I'm just running through these because we're leading into an exercise here, and I want to give the time on that. There's that significant winter precipitation. Again, snow and ice is what we worry about. A couple of inches, tenth of an inch of ice, aggravation. Got to scrape the windshield. Anything above that, anything above 4 inches is a problem. Anything above a quarter inch of ice is a problem. Power outages, interruption of staff flow, and things like that. We've mentioned fire and smoke. Not only is this an emergency management plan if it involves evacuation, but it's a standard hospital emergency plan. And you guys do the heavy lift on the fire extinguishers, fire alarms, water, sprinkler systems, standpipe systems, all areas that are under your purview. And I'll have to tell you the requirements there. And then the last one is that loss of utility. So, man, what a comprehensive policy this is. This covers all those utilities we talked about earlier, from data, communications, water, sewer, HVAC, and you can imagine that policy should be 1,000 pages long, just in how we manage that, but it's not. It does give us an overarching. So, all right. We're getting into, man, we're in the home stretch here. We're in the home stretch. So we got about 20 minutes here, and I want to get us done on time. So there are certain requirements for drills and exercises, and that is one of the requirements of our accreditation bodies for our overall preparedness. And here's the discussion point, I guess, what I'm trying to get into, because I'm looking through our slides here. I don't think we're doing really an exercise here, are we, Lindsay? I think we're just really covering the information. What of all this that we've talked about, and there's been a lot, what should you drill on? Which of these should you drill on? Because and what document is going to help guide you on what of these incidents that we just covered should you drill on? I'm comfortable with silence, so we'll
Well,
hang.
I know we do mass casualty drills, local level fire drills. I'm trying to think what else kind of drills we do.
Active shooter drills.
Active shooter, yep.
Decontamination drills.
We try and drill everything, but you can't drill everything all the time. So we try to go with basically, I'm probably not going to have a large scale emergency management exercise that's just putting out a trash can fire, right? Because we're running a lot of fire drills, we're running a lot. But what I like to do is run something that we don't do often. So nursing will call that low frequency, high risk. So it's a low frequency procedure, but it comes with a very high risk. And that's what you want to target in on when you're drilling. So again, we're not getting multi-casualty incidents every day. God forbid we ever get an active shooter situation. But because you're not learning and you're not seeing that, like, does a trauma nurse really need to practice CPR every day? Probably not, because they're going to be doing it a lot more. So it's repetitive, and so when you're talking about your drill types, or you're talking about what you're drilling and the whys you're doing it, it's the low frequency. It's the ones where staff and team member knowledge may not be as great as they would for some things, and that's how you want to target those. Drills versus procedures, which basically are available to you at any time. That's the quick reference guide. Again, those outline what to do in an incident, procedures and things that are, it talks about incorporates the patient into the action plan, like remove the patient from the area of spill. But what it's really drilling down to here is, what should you do? What drill should you focus on? And that's really identified in your HVA. One of the first questions we have in each of those HVAs is, has this event occurred in the last 5 years, or have you conducted an exercise? If you answer no, it's going to give you a negative score. It's going to deduct from your overall score. So that says we really need to drill that. Or if we haven't had it, like if it's me and I'm planning drills for the coastal region, I'm probably not doing a hurricane drill. And you're going, well, why not, Kev? Well, it's because we've had real ones. So we've had exercises, we've had incidents that we've learned from and built our policies from. But you might think about running a winter weather drill. You might run because that's not something, well, you don't have to now, you've had a big one. But you always just want to drill something that's going to be beneficial where you just don't have the knowledge. All right. Let's go ahead and fill those in there, Lindsay. I think we're in a good place here. Oh, no, sorry. Go back one. Sorry. I got a little too ahead. You've got actual drills and then tabletop drills. So the Joint Commission and guys, help me with DNV. Can someone let me learn a little bit from you guys here a little bit. What's DNV's requirements when it comes to exercises and drills in emergency management world? Do they have a number, like you got to do this many or have this many in a year?
I've never heard any requirement for that.
Okay.
Honestly.
Okay. I'll have to research that myself. We might have it here on our own documents a little later on. I don't want to jump ahead, but we can read it. In the Joint Commission world, they're going to tell you a hospital facility is going to be required to have at least 2 exercises or drills. One must include an influx of patients if you have an emergency department. And one must have community involvement. So you've got to partner with your local community agencies. Could be another hospital, could be your local fire department, could be your local EMS or medic, or your local emergency management coalition. So now you can substitute real events for them, but what they don't like is a tabletop. So a tabletop, just for your awareness, a tabletop is when we gather literally around a table and we say, okay, guys, we're going to exercise today our plan for hospital evacuation. But we're not going to go evacuate anybody. We're going to sit at this table and we're just going to work through the plan. And that's good to figure out if you have a plan, figure out, does everybody know where to find the plan? But you're really not practically exercising any of that. Okay, great. So it's 2 a year. And again, 1 to evaluate the community and exercise the MOUs. Okay. So DNV is similar, very similar. Sounds like a direct crosswalk there to DNV, 2 a year. But a tabletop versus a live exercise, they're good, but they're not a substitute. So don't lean on those very often. just get those to prepare and maybe form ahead. Will?
So,
Thoughts?
9 times out of 10, you use the tabletop to actually do the drill.
Yeah.
It's like
To
a
form it.
prerequisite for your full scale exercise. You want to go through the tabletop first, then the actual exercise. And that's where your procedures will be. It kind of all plays off each other. The procedures will play into the tabletop plays into the actual full scale exercise. So they all run or coincide with each other.
Yep. That's a good point. It just the build up, I think that next slide, I'm sitting here, I'm sitting there struggling going, what does DNV say? Well, Kip, how about read the information? Right. So Lindsay's going, Kip, you put this information together with us, but there's the 2 a year. I don't know if I've ever remember working in healthcare where we only had 2 incidents or 2 drills in a year. Normally it's 6, 7, 8, because there's these real events that we capture that help us learn and train, just like the foodborne viruses, your snow event. But there are times that we do have drills for things that we hope we don't have: active shooter, lockdown, bomb threat, hostage, those types of things. All right. Emergency preparedness on the training side, again, they require that we do have training. Can anyone give me the answer for how we cite our training for emergency preparedness or emergency management? Those are interchangeable words when it comes to healthcare. Okay, so some people like to use the word preparedness, but it's emergency management is sort of the overarching term as well. But can anyone give us evidence? How do we cite or how do we evidence team member training for emergency preparedness here at Novant Health? How do you get exposed to that if it's not part of a class that you're taking today?
Just do
AMEs.
Yep. AME. So at least annual mandatory education will expose you to it. The quick reference guides that are posted on your walls in your respective units is a way we cite that. iLearn has a number of computer-based learning modules, although some of them aren't required and they don't, mandatory go into your database for you to complete like others do. And then, of course, drills and exercises. But I think one of the things, and some of you guys will know for the fire drills, is it possible in a 1-year span to conduct enough fire drills that all 40,000 team members have participated in them? It's just not possible. It's just not possible. So the annual mandatory education, quick reference, and things like that are really required to help get that information, because you're not going to practically be able to do an exercise with every team member every year. It's just not possible. Even for a large scale exercise like an active shooter, it's only in one part of the day. And since we don't want to do those a lot because of the logistics behind them, you're not going to hold 3 in a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and then 1 at night. You're generally just going to hold 1 per year at best. Okay. We cover that a little bit here around individual roles and things. We talk about the emergency response and that HAZWOPER, which is those requirements. I would dare say that Will probably spoke a lot more in depth on that. You noticed how I've been around the hazardous materials game for a long time, and you notice how I said it's ethyl methyl bad stuff, and again, there's things that Kip doesn't touch. So it's like, if you see Kip in a suit, the world is about to end, because Kip doesn't like hazardous materials. If I was going to be a hazmat operator, I'd have stayed in the fire service. But there's a lot of things out there to do on that. With you guys, it's around identification, certainly knowing your local emergency response procedures. And since you and your teams handle most of these hazardous materials, it's important for you all to do that. From a training perspective, again, how we expose people, I've been here long enough to know when we used to have to do a little bit more testing on that in our AMEs for identifying and writing down, but I don't know if we're as strict on that anymore, given all the electronic tools that we have now. Like MSDS is now just MDS. It's all online. You can look it up from anywhere, or you just make that phone call, and it's come a long way from the manuals and things like that. Guys, you know what that is? That's the last slide. As they used to say, that's the last one. No T. We've covered a lot of information today. We've had a lot of good conversation. I've learned some things from you all. I trust we've been informative around the emergency management, required documentation for our regulatory agencies and our accreditation bodies. Things that are just right, things that we just should do and be prepared as an organization to take care of each other and take care of the patients. And then we've covered a lot of acronyms, and there's nothing like emergency management for acronyms. But don't let it be any more complicated than what the name says.
Now, here's the funny part, Kip.
Go ahead.
So FEMA and everybody else has a whole section, a whole thing, agenda, had conferences, no acronyms.
That's right.
They want plain language, no acronyms.
We
But
try. We
yeah,
try
but
so hard.
next year they publish a book called the FAT book, the Fast Acronyms Training Book. So they can't make their mind up whether they want to go acronyms or plain language, but here we are.
We in healthcare cannot get away from calling or using acronyms. It's like the military. And I think it's confusing. And as much as I want nursing to go away from even what they use and just say cardiac respiratory emergency versus code blue, or, whatever, I say keep it plain, keep it simple. But we've covered a lot here today, so we're just going to ask if there's any final questions or thoughts. I know we've got a few minutes, give you a few minutes of a break before we get into security management, which I'm sorry to say is sort of heavy on the lecture side. But is there any questions or concerns you have about emergency management or something that just doesn't resonate or didn't resonate with you?
And if you do offline, for the greater Winston market, I am your guy. My counterpart down in the Charlotte market is Christopher Spenard. That Spenard. So please reach out to us. We'll assist however you need us to. That's what we're here for.
Of course. Also, shout out to the Coastal team there, Aaron Gonzalez and Haley, as is your dedicated emergency management personnel there, coordinator and manager, and then of course protective services and everybody. If you don't know your resources, please engage. I feel you do. I'm sure you do, but want to give them a shout out.
Absolutely.
All right. Any questions, comments, cheap shots, concerns?
One thing I noticed earlier, Kip, was the difference on the HVA tool on the stuff that's more specific to public safety versus utility stuff. And I noticed like the utility stuff scores were a lot higher. I didn't know if that was just kind of a result of us not being more involved, if we need to try and be more involved in those HVAs.
I think personally what I think is those tools they don't weight the score based on, oh God, how am I trying to say this? Every question is weighted the same. And I think if we want to evolve that form to the next level, we should weight some of the answers. In other words, it's great that we have a plan, but how good is it? In other words, it gives you a false sense. They scored high because we have plans, like winter weather. Well, yeah, it can affect us, but we have a plan. We have a good plan. Well, what if the plan doesn't work, or what if the plan is not sufficient? So I think what we've been challenged before on that is we've been told by Joint Commission and others, oh, your form's best practice. I want a copy. I think this is best practice. But at the same time, I'm looking at it going, do we really score 100 out of 100? on all these areas and maybe give us a false sense of preparedness. So I think what we need to do, to your point, is some of it needs to be a little more weighted. Like, sure, you have a plan, but that doesn't give you a perfect score. It just tells you you're better prepared than maybe someone that doesn't have it. But I agree, we should evolve that tool to the next level.
That's a great tool. I didn't know if there was things we could do to kind of make that more accurate.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, for the ones that I do, the hospitals where I still coordinate them, we send them to the engineers for those sections because
Yeah.
we don't know how to answer the questions. I don't know enough about it. I know enough to be dangerous, but I don't know enough to be accurate. So,
Thank you, guys.
yeah. That's another thing about emergency management. Emergency management is not a department and it's not an individual. It's a conglomerate. It's the entire organization. Like nursing knows how to do downtime procedures in nursing. I don't, right? So it's emergency management is everybody. If you don't have everybody at the table, you're going to be in a bad place coming down the pipe. So
That's the best way to put it. Make sure everyone's at the table.
Yeah, I think Ted will ask me questions, but I don't know that I've sat down and gone through all of them with him. So I guess just from my perspective, I probably need to be more intentional about going through all those with him. So.
and I think
Honestly, I wouldn't.
based on what we learned earlier, I'm gonna be a little more intentional around just because you've been doing it for years, get somebody else involved in doing it, the scores may change. You know what I'm saying? So
And honestly, I would get involved more as well, Jamaica, because that also determines which exercises and drills you conduct the following year.
yeah. We're
Yeah, I know.
supposed to take them off of that HVA. It's supposed to tell us what the next year's focus is on. And if you're sitting there going green across the board on utilities and we're not, then that'd be a good exercise to see how that company, what would Matthews Medical Center do on a 90-degree day when your chillers went down or whatever, right? And you started having to evacuate floor by floor. So
Good practice for Steve and Matt Daniels to maybe look at doing it together.
yeah.
Get involved with something like that.
Yeah, I mean, good, nice shot, Sean.
Sean's always throwing the shots. Oh man. All right. Well, not going to hold you. Let's take a little bit because we're going to come back and finish out the day strong. I know it's been a long day, and we've got security management. We're going to get you through that in a good time and walk away with some knowledge. So
So
thanks.
3:10.
Yeah, that sounds good. It gives about 10, 12 minutes. Maybe get a little snack, get a little something, get a cup of Joe's where I'm heading, and we'll get started. Right. We're giving a moment, get everybody connected back in, get buckled in here for the last ride of the day. Lindsay was telling me you guys are involved in this development class here. How many sessions, how many days do you do again? I may have heard, but I've forgotten.
They have 125 hours of training over a year from June 24 through June 25.
That's impressive.
They meet every 2 weeks on Wednesdays, usually for some long days.
Yeah, 120 hours. That's getting it done. All right. Well, I think we've got most everyone back. We're going to conclude the day here. Again, unfortunately, the glamour is in emergency management. The crux of some of this, and it might be not as glamorous, when we're talking about decontamination, but the security management component for both regulatory compliance, and we're going to talk through them. We've got a lot of information slides. We're going to try to make it as dynamic as we can, but there is a lot of things that we have to. But I'm going to say this as an opening salvo. This was one that sort of confused me back when this happened in those early 2000s. Security management had its own standard in the Joint Commission. Okay. Had its own standard. Separate, all the things you're going to see here today are still elements of performance. But when I thought security and protective services, as we call it here at Novant, was becoming the most needed, the Joint Commission decided to eliminate its independent standard and merge it in with your environment, just general environment of care. When in my career and at Novant, then was when we were growing because threats were growing, violence was increasing, technology and force multipliers like the electronic security devices that we use that Brian was joking about earlier that go down and you got to go back to the old school stuff was evolving leaps and bounds. I mean, you had to become a DPS specialist to even be in security management based on all the technologies. And we now have literal IT professionals that work for us that help manage all of these technologies. So it was an interesting time, but the requirements are still there. But I did want to just open that up to tell you but then you saw what the Joint Commission did a few years ago. They created a new standard for workplace violence. Interesting. To me, it was sort of like catching up to where they had fallen behind with the security management component, because workplace violence becomes such a threat to the overall operations of healthcare. Nurses were leaving the industry, doctors leaving the industry. It was just becoming wholesale because no longer was the nurse and the doctor sanctity of the position. No longer were they given the respect, so people were acting violently towards them. So I think they had to catch up with something. So just a little bit of a background and why security management's important, because Maslow says you first must feel secure before you can do anything. If you ever took that in psychology, you got to feel safety first. You have to feel secure first before you can prosper and do anything. No one wants to work in fear. So we're going to jump in to it, open up with some conversation here. We're going to forgo those housekeeping slides and others. We're going to get right into the objectives, and we're going to make this last look like I got 45 minutes, and I'm going to be true to my word. We're going to get you out of here on time, and we're going to give you some information to go with you. We're going to talk about those requirements. We're going to do a quick risk assessment as Novant. We call them NRATs. Novant Risk Assessment Tools. Again, we developed that. You're going to find it looks very similar to the HVA. It was built off the same. It's actually the NRAT was built first, and then we built the HVA off of it. and I pick on Chip. Y'all know Chip Pfeiffer. I pick on Chip. Next thing you knew, that thing reappeared as a behavioral health risk assessment tool, and I went, wait a minute, I recognize that. I should have put a copyright on it. Get Chip paying me royalties, but no, we use that same tool around best practices. So you're going to get a chance to work through it and do a section in it. You're going to identify and mitigate risk. You're going to talk about our security management plan for overall, because we're required to have that. Steve alluded to that earlier. We're still required to have all the stuff. And then if time allows, and again, we're going to be respectful, we're going to get the knowledge to you without taking up. We're going to simulate a threat, respond to it according to policy, and just give you a way to exercise that. So, again, there's going to be some information slides in here, some learning slides for you around requirements, but we are required to have a security management plan, and everything you're about to see through the next few sections is going to be one that is an element of performance that's required both by our accreditation regulatory, but as you're going to learn, it's the right thing to do. It's absolutely the right thing to do. So I'll get Will, jumped in there. Of course, he comes from a protective services background, was public safety officer and supervisor before moving over into the EM world, which is part of us, and that's why we're known as protective services. We have different divisions within it, from public safety to company police, of course, the emergency management, and then our communications switchboard and even parking. So we've got a lot going on. We are required to have a comprehensive management plan. Each of these things that you're going to see laid out have to be covered in the management plan that, again, helps us maintain a secure environment. We're required, just like in emergency management, to conduct an HVA, we must conduct an annual review of security risk. We normally just call it the risk assessment. It's odd that we do them both, but they're separate. This one really focuses on physical safety and physical security, i.e., violence, panic alarms, locked doors, closed circuit TV, which is a funny term because none of that's even correct anymore if we were really calling it what it is. Today it's data-driven, surveillance, because none of it's recorded on closed circuit. It's all coming over fiber and coming through the network and being recorded on servers. But if you were like me, when I started, it was recorded on VHS tapes that we had to change out every 24 hours for a new tape. So you can imagine I've came a long way in the industry. But all that, and then the continuous evaluation. So just like with EM, we have to go and grow to the threats. So does the security management. So let's start with a comprehensive look at policies. What you're looking at there is not the exhaustive list, but it is the list currently of protective services policies that drive our program. So for those that work at New Hanover or in the coastal region, you're familiar with it's your company police team, as well as now your public safety team, and under the overarching protective services. The strange thing about this is there are certain policies that are required, like the infant protection policy is required because Joint Commission has always been clinical driven and not environmental care driven, or clinical driven first. But they require that. But they don't require that you have an active shooter policy. They just tell you you should address it, you should look at it, it's important. But again, it's interesting where many of the things you see here are not required in the new standard. Some were in the old standard, like VIP, civil disturbance, forensic patients that come in the custody of law enforcement. But we keep them because it's best practice. And that's something to differentiate. There may be something in your engineering world that and this is what's unique, remember this, healthcare, single most regulated industry in America, bar none. That's a fact. Every regulatory and governing agency is involved in healthcare. And then we have accreditation. So EPA, OSHA, all the federal, NFPA, okay, and then accreditation bodies on top of that. It's the single most regulated industry in America, even above the nuclear industry. Nuclear industry doesn't have CMS. They don't have Joint Commission accreditation. Like, so it's literally everyone touches this. You have to have these policies to meet that, or you'll fall under the you might be found in violation of the OSHA, just the general clause of providing a safe environment. And this is how we demonstrate that. So it's a lot to deal with, from weapons to workplace violence to risk assessments to hostage, bomb, you name it. That's just an somewhat inclusive list of the procedures and policies that we have in place here. We're required to identify persons entering our buildings. Joint Commission says in the standards there, you see it in the elements of performance, you must identify persons entering your building. And we do that. We identify them in 3 ways. You're either a team member, you're a patient, or you're a visitor. So ID, team members, patients have armbands. Everyone else on our campus is considered a visitor. Now we're adding electronic visitor management. We're adding things to help further identify visitors in high risk environments. For those that don't know, Presbyterian, because of its high risk area, we identify everyone that comes through the door now by scanning their driver's license, taking a picture, and issuing a badge. That's not done at any other facility, but it's about to happen at Huntersville. It's just a way to enhance that identification. Seth, you got a question?
Yeah, so I have vendors in and out of my facility all day long, contractors, and they all want badges and access. And I'm told they can't have badges. I give keys. The keys get missing. It's just, I don't know. There needs to be a better way. And this
I
green
agree.
security thing is kind of a step in the right direction, but it's just not being implemented very well, I don't think.
I don't disagree, and this is I think this is you just opened me up for a great conversation in the equation that Novant does every day. Remember, I was talking about risk versus reward earlier, or I was talking about low frequency but high risk. In order to issue an ID badge in our system to anyone, someone must be their parent in the system. So what would have to happen is a person like yourself or others have to go in there. You have to create an account. You have to load all the information in. You have to create them a username. Basically, that's your corporate ID. And all that has to happen because that's the process to get an ID badge. And then someone has to manage. Well, Seth, the first thing, and this is not an indictment towards anyone because we want to do the right thing, folks will say, well, that's not worth it. It's not, we can't do that for the X thousands of contractors and vendors. Let's use green security or let's use this. So we hadn't even scratched the surface yet. We're just getting started. You've already identified what we consider a risk for Novant Health, that not everybody has that. And there's the obstacle or barrier that we have to overcome for that. So I think you've offered a great observation. I just wish I could give you the answer to close that out, but that's one of the things we struggle with every day on our campuses. Brian?
Yeah, I'll piggyback on what Seth said, and we're working on some. We have a Tatika now from the badge office working with plant engineering.
Mhm.
And what we've come up with, I've found a coded key machine to where we can issue vendors a code access, and it releases a peg from the machine upon entry of their code. And we've done some of what you said, a parent badge, and it has a set of keys with it, and it'll give them plant engineering access. And then we give them, a vendor badge, but we can track that. And it's something new that we're trying. It's something that I've tried to implement for a few years, and I finally got management to agree to it within my department here. So we're going to try to roll that out shortly and be able to audit who checks in and checks out stuff. And it also eliminates us from having to be in the office to physically hand them the badge or the key.
Yeah. just another glowing example of how emergency management is not an individual, not a department, but it's everyone. If you're not involved in the security plan for Novant Health, you're probably not, you're not meeting muster, because your job is to know that. I don't know your vendors, but you do. I don't know your containers, but you do. So again, looking for that, knowing that that exists, and that's one of the ways that we help the overall security plan. 40,000 team members are the eyes and ears of protective services, just like you would hope the same. And I know Chip laments on this all the time. He says, how many times are we going to have to run fire drills before everybody learns race and pass? Like, because every time you go out and do a survey, no one knows what the fire plan is. It's just race, remove, activate, contain, extinguish, and evacuate. What's the problem? And he's banging his head against the door, and I go, you got to get it to 40,000 people, and that's not their priority until it is, till you get your purse stolen or your keys get missing or those pipes get gone, that copper gets missing. You're right. So again, great analogy. I digress. Lindsay, I can see we're going to need 3 hours for this session. We're just going to have to go late. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to get you out of here on time. Let's go jump back. We talked a lot about that. Now, they also require, and this is what I was talking about, and you're going to see this coming up when you do the risk assessment exercise. We, as a healthcare organization, are charged to identify our sensitive areas. And since your hospitals are uniquely different and they have different areas, this depends on your location. But Novant Health, in their security management plan, and you can look that up, it's right there online, Document Manager, we already pre-identify 4 areas that are industry standards. Number 1, the nursery. Okay, obviously a sensitive area. Number 2, the pharmacy, right? I mean, we just don't let anybody into where we keep the drugs. There's regulatory requirements, and that's just common sense. Next is the emergency department, because it's one of the highest risk places in the healthcare facility. Typically, it rates number 1 as the highest likely area of incidents. And then the 4th and final one generally ranks number 2 on the risk of incidents, and that's the behavioral health unit. So those 4 areas are what Novant Health pre-identifies as sensitive areas. We have additional cameras, locking devices. In most cases, there are additional personnel, company police, public safety, that are stationed in those areas, especially the ED and behavioral health. And all the bells and whistles, panic alarms, you name it, everything we can do to mitigate risk in those areas, we do. Now, as an operator and part of your overall committee, your environment of care, whatnot, we have the ability to identify other areas. Here's some examples. We identify the OR as a sensitive area. Obviously, high risk area, don't want folks wandering in there, crossing red lines, getting into things that they don't need to get into. Administration has been identified as a sensitive area at most hospitals. There was a time when you didn't worry about someone going into the president's office and cursing them out or getting in a fight. But in this day and age, that's a real threat. And we've seen it happen. Your engineering buildings, your central energy plants are considered sensitive. We don't want anyone in your generator room. We don't want anyone in our infrastructure, our boilers, our chillers. We don't want anyone in there that doesn't belong. And as well as I do, I'm preaching to the choir. Those are difficult to secure. They're difficult to secure for all the reasons you've already mentioned, right? How many times have you found a coat hanger or a piece of wire or whatever, tying a door back, getting into a utilities area where guys are working? Security's hard. It's not convenient. And that's something that we fight and challenge every day. And that's why we need everybody's help. So again, security sensitive areas. Jumping in, never events. Sorry, I'm looking at 2 different slide presentations. I'm trying to keep up, but Lindsay's faster than I am. We are also required by accreditation that we have a list of what we call never events or National Quality Forum, NQF. Again, this is getting a little deep into the Joint Commission requirements that we have to report that are reportable events for things like again, Joint Commission, they include, and I'm just going to paraphrase through. They're really types of what used to be called, for those of us that have been around for a while, serious safety events or serious reportable events. This might be a death. This might be a sexual assault on campus, whether it was to a caregiver, to a patient, or to a visitor. So basically, if it happens on our campus and it's a serious crime or serious physical harm, it's a reporting requirement. Also, anything where certain individuals that commit crimes like licensed events, Sentinel event, thank you, Lindsay, Sentinel event, certain things that involve license, like if a physician harms a patient or someone's impersonating a physician. And then again, we get back to any serious act of violence or things that have to be. So our policies cover that to say what is reportable outside. We as an organization can't take any action to conceal that. And then we have to, again, show our mitigation and how we're responding to that. All right. We're required to report. So we have to keep documentation. One of the requirements there is it'll say in your security management plan must outline how you report incidents and your procedures for doing so. So again, we take individual reports on matters like some what you've been talking about, theft, loss of property, loss of keys. Some is reported and we make determinations on whether or not we're going to prosecute or if we're going to seek criminal charges. Let me give you a good example. This past week, we had an anonymous report of theft being perpetrated by a team member at a practice. It was anonymous, not a lot to go on. We investigated. We interviewed. There was an admission made. So we determined that, in fact, someone was committing a crime. They were taking property. We made the decision that our organization, based on what occurred, we were not going to seek criminal charges or press any criminal charges. We would allow for the human resources team and the administrative team to take administrative action. Between me and you, obviously that's probably more consequential than the criminal justice system right now because that costs someone their career, costs them a job. So we make those decisions based all the time, and that's just part of our incident reporting and the way we work. Some of you may have been involved in those. I'm preaching to the choir here, to a few of these members that worked in our world, but if we don't always look to charge people with crimes, we're basically trying to keep the operations of the hospital and what's best for them, and sometimes what's best for the individual and our organization. So just a real quick hit on that. Again, we have staffing plans and we have a staffing policy. And then we also have what type of, and this is where it gets a little bit into, there's no benchmarking, and I'm not sure you guys have it either, but I'm going to poll you here. I'm going to ask you a question. What determines the size of your engineering departments? For those of you that work in engineering, what determines the size of your department? Is there a metric that you use that determines that?
Yeah.
Not okay.
Square footage of the
Square
building.
footage.
Age of building or age of equipment.
Yep. Square footage maintained has been a long-standing benchmark in the engineering side because it gives a pretty clear picture. If you're having to maintain 1 million square feet, you're going to have some people to do it. If you're maintaining 1 million square feet that was built in 1947, which was the main part of Presbyterian Hospital, that main section there, the middle H, is when it was constructed, you're going to have a few more people. All right. Protective Services doesn't really have a national benchmark. It never has. Square footage is only one. You can have 1 million square feet, but if it's in downtown, beautiful USA with a low crime rate, you may only need a certain amount of people. But if that same area is inside of an urban high crime district, like a lot of hospitals are, you're going to need more personnel. So we basically analyze what it looks like for us to staff a hospital. So you see that community hospitals may only have 2 officers on duty, and that's sufficient. Some days it's not. Or you may come to a tertiary care center like a New Hanover, a Presbyterian, a Foresight. We could have 12 uniformed officers on duty at any given time, plus support staff. There could be 15 protective services members on duty based on the fact of historical data, like some of the things you mentioned. So again, those are just one of the ways around security response, how we determine staffing. And those are things that have to be analyzed, and we're getting to that. We're leading into it. All right. There's your Joint Commission requirements about being prepared and all the things that are required, and each one of them. All right, Lindsay, let's jump into, here's one of the requirements. This is reminding me how much information we're giving y'all in a short amount of time, so you may hear me apologize a couple of times through this because this is just a lot of information to download. All right. And Will, you know, I get moving like a freight train. So if you need to jump in here, you just throw a hand up or jump
Fine,
in.
continue on.
I am dead set on getting these guys out by 1600. So I'm gonna make it happen.
Absolutely.
This is, again, we wanted to touch back on this. You saw it before. We want to show you again. You are required to have this, period. There's a non-negotiable from our accreditation bodies. Okay. So you have to have that. And Novant uses something that is not required, but is considered an industry standard, and that's the electronic monitoring. Not all hospitals use it, and it's not a requirement by accreditation and standard, but it is certainly best practice that we utilize that. And again, that's just leveraging that technology that when I started didn't exist. There was no such thing as infant protection bracelets and Wi-Fi driven monitoring for infants, but we certainly use that now as part of that procedure. All right. We are required now to have workplace violence management plans. So it's on standard. They build an entire standard, but for most hospitals, it's going to fall under the purview of your security department or protective services team. So things that you're seeing there, again, sorry, I'm just making things a little larger so I can see them. Some of the things you're going to see there is around our statement of zero tolerance and our public facing. So your signs that you see coming in. Has anyone happened to see, and I won't fault you if you hadn't, but it's my mommy works here campaign, my dad works here campaign, where we're getting out messaging that just says, hey, these are human beings that work here. Don't beat them up, basically, because you know as well as I do, you see the effects. If you're leaders, you're on the calls where you hear about that. And these are the things that are included in that. Education, preventative measures, and most importantly, response and recovery. Because like I was telling you earlier, I don't know if you've ever had an incident or you've been involved in a criminal event that made you want to change your career, but that happens to a lot of caregivers. If they're attacked, and the guys, again, I don't have to tell you, if you're at the coast, I know you know the story. Just a few years ago, we had 2 nurses in the emergency department violently attacked and choked, almost both to death. Now, when you see that happen or you have that event happen, you'll change your mind about working in healthcare. And that's why we have to have these robust policies and plans in place to help try and mitigate that. All right. Sorry, I'm trying to follow along with you here, Lindsay, and I'm failing miserably on mine. Policy has to be in place. You can see that. That's one of the ones that's there. And again, that's the next one. Go ahead. You can advance to the next one. Like I was telling you before, the big one is the support. Will alluded to this one earlier around one of the 6 critical functions of emergency management is staffing and resources. When it comes to this is how well, and what we're trying to focus on at Novant is how well are we taking care of the people that are the victims of this workplace violence? What are we doing? What are we doing to your team members that are affected by maybe not workplace violence? It's possible, though. You absolutely can happen in your area. But what are we doing to take care of them and make them resilient? Critical incident stress management, employee assistance programs, counseling, and things like that. And one of the barriers we have is nurses are tough. Protective services guys are tough. Engineering guys are tough. We don't need that. We're fine. And that's one of the barriers that we have in getting that through is, yeah, we're tough, but we still don't like getting cussed out. And if I get cussed out just so much, I might not be here anymore. I might just leave the industry. So anyway, just want to let you know that's some of the things we work on, and that's what the security management plan has to include, not just prevention and response, but we've also got to help on the recovery side. Some of the things we do there is around not only the reporting, but how we go and help people file charges. We've helped team members file protective orders, also known as restraining orders against domestic violence partners. And that's something that we do, and we try to help guide you through because we want you to be safe at work. You're very vulnerable in the workplace, and that's why we have all these different strategies. You're vulnerable in the workplace because it's open. We're open to the public. People can come in the front door, and that's why we're trying to tighten it down. We have armed officers at Novant Health. You might have worked at a facility. You might know colleagues that work at facilities that don't invest in that, but we think it's important to have a full service department. It'd be tough to run metal detectors and look for weapons and you not be armed to, deal with that violent threat if it happens. So we think that's important. Panic alarms at high risk areas, and now we're putting them in all areas. So if we build a new hospital, even Med-Surg has them. We put them in every unit. Every department has panic alarm devices now. We just don't limit it to the ED or BH. Metal detectors, we're adding 3 more facilities, so now we'll be up to 6 of our 17 hospitals will now have metal detection at the ED, and the goal of our division is to have all of them have it at the EDs and maybe even beyond. All right. Gosh, a lot of stuff here, a lot of coverage. Y'all guys hanging in there. Keep drinking coffee. I don't know how I keep up, and I probably don't. That's why we have great people that work for us, just like I know you guys have a lot of very technical, skilled folks that work for y'all, and y'all have learned a lot over the years. But when I entered the industry, we did not have computers. We had cable run video cameras that recorded on VHS tapes. We had magnetic card readers that had a magnet in them, and one magnet touched the other magnet and it released the door. Pretty simple. Now, I can't even tell you how much electronics we have. I can't even, we don't have enough time to go through what we have. And that's just the modern era. So it's a force multiplier. It does the job for you when you're not there to do it. And we just continue to get more and more items every day. One of the things that we're deploying now, some of you are aware of it. If we have it at Valentine, and the next one will be Forsyth, and it'll be all over, is personal panic devices that are about the size of my badge clip. So nurse walks through the building, anywhere in the building under Wi-Fi, he or she just reaches up, hits the button, it activates an alarm, tells us within 6 feet where they are, so we can send officers to them. So the organization invested in that. It'll be coming across over the next year. And that's just the next level technology that we're using for physical security. All right. We're to the exercise. Just about perfect time. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on this, and then we're going to come back and we're going to round up. So we are going to conduct quickly a Novant Health risk assessment. Now, Lindsay, I know we were going to parse this out and give each member here a tab to fill out based on their knowledge. Don't worry if you see a question and you have no clue what that question is, it's okay, but we want to give you exposure to this. This is that risk assessment tool. Lindsay?
Yeah, so all of you will have a spreadsheet that you received this morning. This is what the front of it looks like. It says NRAT template. You also receive this afternoon your assignments for which tab you are going to spend a few minutes just evaluating threats for that area. Just use your best judgment and the knowledge that you have. It is hypothetical, it's just for your personal consideration, and then we'll come back and talk about what some of your assumptions and priorities were. So we'll give you, I don't know, just a few minutes to do that
Say,
individually.
yeah, no more than 5. Yeah, I would say let's just give you a moment and at the level best answer as many of the questions as you can. And that way you've got some really some visualization of how we assess risk for all those different ones that you were assigned to. And let's look, 346. Tell you what, let's be aggressive the way I know Novant Health is, because we don't do second place very well. We like to be number 1. Let's come back at 3, or we'll come back to discussion at 350. We'll give you about 4 minutes or so. Take a look at it. Let's answer some questions, get a feel for it, and then we'll discuss that end wrap.
Does anyone need their assignment? Okay.
Good
Hey,
deal.
Lindsay, what spreadsheet was that?
It's called, it says NRAT template. NRAT template security management homework.
All right, I got it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Yep, they're doing an exercise. Yeah, go ahead. Come on.
I'll be back in Salisbury on Monday.
So are we doing all of these or just the one we are assigned to?
Yeah,
the
just
one?
the one you're assigned to.
All right.
Trying to pull one up for you real quickly here.
I'll pull up Presby since
Oh yeah, please. Thanks, Lee.
you're welcome. And that's going to be one of the homework assignments is to identify those top 3 threats and then some mitigation measures for those.
Now, is that homework due today, or can we bring that? Because the dog got a hold of my homework.
For you, it's due today.
Yeah, that's right.
No, they're going to do the homework in class and
Okay.
the next, 96 seconds.
There
Hey,
you go.
Kit,
Yes.
I have a question maybe you can help me with. I have behavioral health,
Yes.
and it says, are behavioral staff required to attend CPI training? I don't know what CPI is.
Yeah. So, and that should now actually change. I believe our new forms, that's the verbal de-escalation and physical intervention training.
Oh, so
Novant
that's-
now uses MOAB.
All right, yeah.
MOAB is the management, remember, we love acronyms, management of aggressive behavior. But basically, it's a course to teach someone how to de-escalate a verbal conflict. And
Right.
if someone physically assaults them, it gives them some defensive physical techniques to try and stop the assault.
So that BH staff is required to do that?
That's correct. There's 3 folks here at Novant that we currently, under our security management plan, require to do it. ED staff, BH staff and protective services staff. And in some cases with the vendors y'all deal with, should be plant engineering staff.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
one more question for you on that. I
Yep.
don't know the answer to. Behavioral health unit, do patients are they required to sign a non-violence agreement?
That's correct. So one of the strategies that is used across the industry is a patient will meet with the caregiver when they first come on the unit, and they will sit down and physically sign an agreement that they will treat the team members with respect. They will not act violently towards the team members. So it's like they're trying to form a contract to behave and not act violently. We're not
Some
saying
of
it's an end all fail, end all cure all, but it's one of the tools that's considered best practice in the industry.
Well, some of those people probably can't be bound by a legal agreement.
No.
In the
And
mental state that they're in.
it's really like we talked about the handshake agreement. It's sort of like we're trying to set the tone
Expectation.
that we're going to treat you with kindness. We want you to treat others with kindness, and then you sign it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
So, well, since we've started on the behavioral health, let's just go through that. And you all consider this for your respective divisions and areas. And you may have been like Brian reading those questions going, I'm not sure what is this? Why is that important? Again, if you were building out an assessment of how robust your electrical system is, how robust your architectural, plans were, et cetera, something that you have a really good knowledge. One or two of you on here may be certified, licensed plumber, licensed HVAC technician, et cetera, and you would know what questions to ask, where I may not, about how you do this or how you do that, or how many PSIs this does or whatever. What we try to do is gather the best industry standards for each of these areas. Do you use panic alarm systems? Do you have armed officers? Do you have metal detection? Do you use canines in the enforcement of your security management plan? Do you have body-worn cameras? That's something that we're looking at. All this. What's your staffing model? Yada, yada. So each one of these has that, and it formulates that score. And that's how we then assess. So the difference between our assessment tool and most others is this one is not subjective. This one's not subjective to my thoughts. They're answers. You either yes or you're no. So you literally, you have to answer it. You either do this or you don't do it. And it's either going to score you positively or it's going to score you negatively. And that's how we built the tool, so that people can come in and go, well, you say you don't need that, but okay, but here's the questions, here's the assessment tool. So just giving you an idea. And once we form this up and we see where we're not doing well, and if you'll go back to that summary page, you'll see the emergency departments are going to score low because there's inherent risk that we can't stop. I'll give you an example. In 2024, New Hanover Medical Center and Presbyterian Medical Center both received 115 gunshot wound victims, either by ambulance or by car. That's community violence. And there's nothing that Novant necessarily can do to prevent community violence. So when we see that metric, we know we have to be prepared for it. And that's how it scores. There's just inherent risk in being a trauma center because bad things are going to come to you. Same way with dietary and others. They don't have a lot of security management plans in place. They change staff a lot. There's just inherent things there that we just can't improve upon, but we try. I think again, I want to call out protective services. We generally will score high, the public safety one, and it's like, whoa, we're high. It could be a false sense. Yeah, we do a lot. We have armed officers. We have equipment. We use state-of-the-art technology. But at the same time, can still happen. Violence can still come, but we do have a lot of mitigation in place. But again, I think, you could look at this and go, yep, okay, well, you do all that, and that's good. But at the same time, so why do we do what here's the crux of the exercise. Why do we do a risk assessment tool? Little cheater hint here. Same reason we do an HVA that you learned about earlier, right? It identifies our risk. It identifies our security threats so that we can then put plans and mitigation in place to correct them. If you guys go out there and determine your generators are running inefficiently and you're going to then spend the money to upfit them or retro or whatever, and there you are. Oh God, 3 minutes. Brian put me on a spot here. Brian's giving me like 3-minute warning things. I feel like I'm in a hurry up offense here. Is this what Brady feels like? But
And that was a
again,
private message.
oh well, so I don't. There's no privacy. There's no privacy in protective services. No, I promise you, I'll get you out of here. I just want to make sure you understand that how Novant develops. And again, we don't just say, well, we think this is a good idea, or well, what does Atrium do? In the security management industry, you have to take from historical events, you have to take from real current events, and then you have to take care of your team members' perception and their reality. And if you're operating a hospital in today's day and time with the rate of violence, you're going to have a good security management plan, and it evolves with the location. I think we're seeing that in real time with a Matthews Medical Center. A community hospital, sure, but they're starting to see a level of violence in the ED that prompted us to recommend and seek approval, which we got to put metal detection at that hospital. So there'll be more to come, I'm sure. All right.
Hey, Kip, I have a 4 o'clock meeting, but I just want to thank you. This is a very entertaining class, one of the most entertaining of the session. So appreciate that.
Thanks, man.
Have a good one.
Appreciate it, Seth. Have a good afternoon. Be safe, stay warm, stay dry. So we'll hit that Q&A. We've got about a minute and a half left before my commitment to you all. And you've got a lot of material here, by the way. So if you want to see, I thought Lindsay did a great job with these slides. They're just so informative. You don't need anyone presenting them. They're very informative. But what questions might you have on the security management component? Well, either we did a good job and you fully, or you're going, I'm not asking this guy a question. It's just not going to happen. But either way, it was good to meet everybody. Good to see some familiar faces again. Meet some new folks that I haven't ever worked with, and haven't seen some of you in a minute. But it was a good time. I had a good time doing it, and I was glad to come and help show you a little bit of that world that we live in.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys.
All right.
I had a quick question for Lindsay on the part that we filled out. It says value. Are we supposed to score a value there too? Out to the yes/no questions?
It auto-populates. Yeah. It auto-populates it, Brian. The only thing you got to do is put an X mark in those things, and then it auto scores it.
Okay.
Your spreadsheet may not be working. It could have had an error in it when it got passed around, but it's just basically a spreadsheet with formulas embedded in it.
It also won't let me save it, so I don't.
Yeah. It's probably sometimes they require a passcode to edit them.
You might have to enable macros. If you didn't do that, that might help.
So it doesn't support auto save. It was saved to be compatible with the older version of Excel. That's what my note says. So is that a macro issue?
No, that's a version issue.
You're
right.
You're out of my scope on that one.
Brian, you call DPS.
Yeah, contact the help center.
Okay.
I'm sure they'll get back to you right away.
Sean will fix it.
Yeah, I'll get Sean to fix it. All right. Thank you.
Man, that was a lot of information for an hour, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope you got something out of it. Guys, again, have a good afternoon. Good seeing everybody. Lindsay, thank you. I want to recognize you. You've done a great job putting this together. I appreciate all your help. So If that's it, if no other questions, I'm out.
I appreciate you, Kip. Thanks, Will.
Yeah,
Thanks, guys.
thank you.
Appreciate it.